Hey, I'm Khalila McCoy, and you're listening to the podcast that helps you see the power in your own story. This is Where We Rise. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me this week. Sharing new voices and new stories with you is one of my favorite things to do. Today, I would like to introduce you to Anne. Anne is a beautiful person, and I truly enjoyed our conversation. Her story reminded me just how layered life can be. Anne lives with chronic pain and illness, and it affects every part of her world. Her job, her relationships, the food she can eat, how she's viewed within her culture, and so much more. By sharing her story, she reminds us of the importance of empathy, of slowing down enough to really see one another, and of staying true to ourselves no matter what we're navigating. Her honesty is a powerful reminder that everyone carries something, but we can choose to see ourselves as storytellers, shaping meaning, direction, and purpose as we go. Let's listen. Hi, Anne. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Thank you for having me.
So, for all of our listeners, Anne is actually in India, and we found out, well, I found out, she already knew, but I found out when we were scheduling her recording that it's actually morning there. So it's Saturday morning for you, and you said it's 8 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, it's 8 a.m.
Okay, so she got up early, so thank you so much. And it's 9:30 for me here on Friday night. So you're my first international guest, so I'm super excited to
Yeah.
have you, and I'm super excited to talk to you. It means so much that you would, like I said, get up early, just to get on and share your story with, I like to say the world, but our listeners.
The
So Anne,
world,
tell us,
yeah.
yeah, right. We're gonna speak it out there. The whole world's gonna be listening to this.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I'm Anne Harikeerthan. I'm a writer from India. I actually wanted to be a writer from the time I was really young, but um, my community and family told me to pursue medicine instead. So I joined medical school, and then I became a doctor. And I found that it was a space that was changing me for the worse. It was making me less empathic. And I also noticed that I stopped writing. So I took a decision when I was 3 years into being a practicing doctor that I'm going to leave practice so that I can write. Um, and I write about themes that are related to what I studied. So I write about suffering and about healing. And I also come from a faith tradition. So I do talk about faith and how it relates to suffering. And that's about me. I live here with my husband and I have a cat.
What's your cat's name?
My cat's name is Kambli. It means black
Humbly.
cat because she
Okay.
feels just like a black cat.
Aw, that's cute. I like that. You said Combly?
Yes, Kambli.
Nice. That's pretty. I like that. Well, it's interesting that you're going to talk a little bit about pain today, um, your own kind of journey with pain and just learning how to be kind to yourself. And then you have a message of encouraging people to show empathy as well. So go ahead and kind of tell us, what are you working through right now?
So there are a couple of different kinds of things that I'm working through at the moment. So when I was a teenager, we found that I have migraine, and I think when I was a little older, when I just left clinical practice to become a writer, the migraine intensity increased a lot. It was also the time when I was processing a lot of trauma from the time when I was in medicine and the time when I was a child. So, with all of that, I think that my body really couldn't handle it. So, the migraine episodes just became so many, so frequent that I couldn't work for a really long time. But more recently, in addition to this issue of migraine, we also found that I have an autoimmune condition. And there is a story behind how we discovered that, which I'll tell you in a bit. Um, but it just means that during the winters, a lot of my symptoms get worse. It means that I can't always do the things that I want to, but I need to slow down to allow my body the space to catch up and rest. It is a little difficult. It is an adjustment, but
Hmm.
I feel that it's something worth adjusting to, in that if I am able to take care of my body, then my body is able to take care of me and allow me to do the things that I want to.
You said with the migraines that started when you were younger. How did that come about, finding out that it was migraines that you were having versus just a headache here and there?
So when I was a child, what I noticed was that there were a lot of foods that I didn't like,
Hmm.
and a lot of foods would give me tummy aches. But I didn't know what it was or how to explain it to anybody. Much later, we found out, I found out that migraine in really young children presents with abdominal pain, and
Okay.
it's called abdominal migraine. Um, but when I was a teenager, one evening I just came back from school and I had this pain on one side of my head, and I could hear this really loud buzzing sound,
Mm.
like there were crickets outside the window. It was just so intense. I didn't know what to do, so I just switched off the lights and tried to sleep, but I couldn't sleep. And my brother came back home after his school, and he said, he was really surprised because I usually watch TV or do something else after coming back from
Hmm.
school. But he was like, "How come all the lights are off?" And I shushed him. It's like, shh, it's hurting a lot.
Yeah.
And so he asked me about, the pain and what was going on. He was also in school at this point, but he was, preparing for medical school. And I remember telling him, there are these crickets. They're really annoying and they're really loud.
Mm.
And my brother was like, I don't hear anything. So that's when we realized that it was not just a headache. There was something
Yeah.
else as well. And then later, when I was in medical school, the intensity of the pain and the frequency of the migraines increased. Initially, we didn't really know what it was.
Hmm.
We knew that it was not just a headache, but we weren't very clear on what exactly the diagnosis was. Um, but over time, I began to notice that there were other symptoms that didn't fit into a typical headache, but it had to
Hmm.
be something more. One of it was that sometimes my visual field would look really funny. So it would look as if everything that I'm looking at is zooming in and out, or
Okay.
it would feel like the room is just beginning to spin. Or sometimes I would have tingling on my face or numbness on one side of my body.
Wow. How did you
So,
handle that in those moments? Did you get nervous? Were you scared?
yeah, I was so scared. The first time it happened, I had no idea, and I didn't know that a lot of my triggers were dietary. So,
Hmm.
in fact, the first time that I had this pulsating feeling, like the visual field was just zooming in and out, I had
Hmm.
just eaten something in a restaurant, and it was this dish that I really like. And I came outside, and these symptoms started, and I was so sure I was poisoned because
Oh no.
I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
This is just not typical.
So
Um,
you were able to eat that food before and had no problem, then all of a sudden food started triggering you.
I think it was more that I was eating the food and then developing the symptoms, but not realizing that it was the food that was causing the symptoms.
Okay.
Um, I found out about the food much later when
Hmm.
one of my professors in college said that it's a good idea to keep a migraine journal. So
Okay.
I very meticulously wrote down everything that I was eating. And I don't mean like the name of the dish, but
Hmm.
every ingredient that went
Oh,
into the dish.
wow.
And
And I know in Indian food you use a lot of
yeah,
spices, so I'm sure your
it's a
list for
lot of
each
spices.
meal was very
It
long.
was so long, it was like a page or longer.
Yeah.
Um, and so on one side, I would put down all of the ingredients, and on the other
Hmm.
side, I would put down the time when a symptom began. And that's how I began to notice the correlation. And I found that there were specific foods that caused the migraine. And one of them is bell peppers. Um, and at that point, it was one of my favorite foods. So
Oh,
had to
I'm
give it up.
sorry. Did you find it hard? Like, I know you just said one of them is bell peppers, but were there
Yeah.
other ingredients that would trigger you that were very common in the food that you were eating?
Yes. So, after we found out that I couldn't have bell peppers and I stopped having it, I noticed that I was also getting migraine, but not as intense, with chili peppers. So I had to stop consuming chili, which is very difficult in the Indian context because all our food has chilies. Um, and another really important spice in India that I can't have is cumin. And cumin, again, is something that we use in all of our curries. It's there in almost every Indian dish. So it was quite difficult to give that up. Um, but funnily, what was more difficult than giving it up was convincing people that these are things that can trigger migraine.
So people
Because
weren't
in
believing
no,
you?
no,
Oh,
because in the Indian tradition, cumin is part of a healing. I mean, it's thought to be a healing ingredient. So that's one
okay.
of the reasons why they use it in cooking because they feel that, it reduces bloating, it reduces gastric kind of issues, and it just helps
Okay, so
generally with
culturally you
wellness.
have this, right? So you have
Yeah,
something that's supposed to make you well, and you're like, no, it's actually making me sick.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I could see
So,
that being really hard.
yeah, my dad would often say, no, this is a healing food. How can it
Yeah.
cause headache for you? It just does. Don't know what to
What
say.
was it like for you trying to like avoid those meals and like I said, convincing people? Were you upset at first that people weren't believing you, that they would still try to get you to eat it? Or were you kind of just like understanding that, this is rare, so they don't get it?
It was quite difficult in the beginning, to be honest. Very often people would say that, it's just psychological. And that would hurt me because a lot of the foods that I gave up on were things that I like. So I was like, why would my mind just be like, you can't have this
Like, I'm not making this
when,
up.
yeah. So that was one thing that really bothered me. But actually another thing that really bothered me was that the church that I was going to at that time, they used to have meals together after services, which was very nice. Um, but I explained to them that, I have these dietary restrictions. And then sometimes they would make food which had some of these ingredients. And then they would say, just pray and eat and you'll be okay. If you have a migraine, it means that you don't have enough faith. And I was like, no,
Oh man.
that just,
Yeah.
I think that hurt more. But
Yes.
yeah, it's not easy when people don't take your illnesses seriously.
Did you believe that? Like, oh no, I don't have enough faith?
No, I did not believe that
Okay.
because I had been
I'm glad to
praying
hear
a
that.
while that,
Yes.
it would just go away, but it didn't. Yeah.
So it took a long time for you to figure out those triggers and for you to figure out what you had to change. When you started noticing that it was certain foods and you started letting go of those, did the migraines go away?
Yeah. So, before I found out what my triggers were, I was getting episodes almost every other day.
Mm.
And I remember when I was maintaining this journal of the triggers and the migraine episodes, that's when I found out that 2/3 of my month I was I was in a lot of pain, or I had other
Wow.
symptoms. Um, One of the symptoms that I didn't mention is a symptom called brain fog. It's when you really
Okay.
can't focus on anything. So in
Mm-hmm.
addition to the pain, some of the days I just couldn't focus, which meant that I couldn't write. And I just switched to careers at that point. So it was really upsetting me. But once I found out what the triggers were and I cut them out of my diet, I
Mm-hmm.
found that the symptoms reduced significantly. So I had only
Good.
4 or 5 episodes in a month. And
Okay.
now I just get one, and that's usually around the time of my period. So that's amazing.
Do you have medication that you can take when that happens, or do you just kind of have to fight through it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there there are a lot of medicines for migraine. There are some medicines that prevent migraine. I started taking that when I was uh, really having a difficult time with migraine. But what I found was that it had other side effects, and it wasn't
Okay, yeah.
perfect in its ability to prevent the migraine. So I stopped the medicines and I just focused on reducing or avoiding the triggers, and that worked
Okay.
better.
Yeah.
But when I get an episode now, um, I found that what works best is to take a painkiller really early. So
Okay.
here I just use paracetamol, which I think in the US is called Tylenol,
Yes,
I
yeah.
think. So I just
Mm-hmm.
take one of that really early. So that's when the pain intensity is 1 out of 10. Um,
Okay.
what I used to do before was to think, okay, let's just wait and see. If it gets worse, then I'll take the medicine. But what
Yeah.
ends up happening is as the symptoms worsen, the simpler medicines don't work. At
Mm-hmm.
which point, if I need to feel better, I would need injectable analgesics or I would have to go to
Okay.
the hospital. So
Right.
this is what I found works, which is to take a small over-the-counter painkiller really early. So
Mm-hmm.
as soon as the symptoms begin. And that usually just aborts the symptoms within, I don't know, maybe an hour or so.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So when did you have your last migraine?
Mm, 3 days back when I
Okay.
just
Oh,
started my period.
okay. Oh, lucky you.
Lucky me.
Yeah. But you took the Tylenol and in an hour,
Yeah,
at least that issue in your body was taken care of, right?
yeah,
So then fast forward to your immune system, right?
yeah,
What
yeah.
happened with that?
Okay, so it was winter last year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Pretty much around the same time as now when we're doing this recording. And the temperature was, it wasn't too low. I mean, it's not as cold. It doesn't get as cold here as it does in the US, but
Mm-hmm.
it was colder than the place where I grew up.
Okay.
And during a cold wave, in the middle of the night, it just felt like my toe was hurting. Initially, I thought some insect had bitten it. I took a look and it looked like, swelling a little bit. Just looked like an
Mm-hmm.
insect bite. So I ignored it and I went back to sleep. It didn't occur to me that what was happening was that it was too cold and something was happening to my toes. But within a couple of days, we noticed that the pain hadn't subsided. It had gotten worse and the swelling was worse. And when these symptoms had begun, my husband was not in town. He had gone out of station. And he just came back and he saw my toe and he was like, Anne, it's purple.
Wow. That's not
And
good.
that that started to ring some bells because I remembered from studying medicine that if a toe turns purple, it's usually because it's lost blood supply. And I also knew that if a toe loses blood supply, not all of them, just one toe loses blood supply, it's very likely that the reason why that happened is either just because it's a frostbite or because there's an autoimmune condition which is causing the toe to turn purple. So that's when I began to think that there is an autoimmune condition that's happening, but I didn't know what it was. So I went back to my alma mater, which is a hospital, and I spoke to one of the people who graduated before me, who is a specialist in issues related to the immune system. And she asked a bunch of questions, and she helped me figure out that it was a condition called Sjogren's. But
Okay.
Sjogren's it's quite common apparently, but only some people have symptoms like this of toes
Okay.
turning purple, things of that sort. I didn't know a lot about it at that point, but then I Googled it and I found out that um, one of the Williams sisters, the tennis
Oh,
players, has
yeah.
Sjogren's, and that was so
Okay.
helpful to just hear her story and to know that
Yeah.
she's been through this and she knows what it's like. She knows what it's
Mm-hmm.
like to put a pause on her career because of it and then come back to it, things of that sort. So it was just fantastic to
Yeah,
hear
that's so
another
cool
person's
that you
story.
were, yeah, you were able to
Yeah.
hear her story and kind of feel like you weren't alone in it and that there was hope.
Yeah.
Because I believe you told me before this is not curable, right? So it's something you'll
Yeah,
always
it's
have
not
to
curable.
manage.
Yeah.
Other than your toe losing blood, like and turning purple, what are some of the other symptoms that you experience with this?
So with Sjogren's, it's usually dryness of the skin, of the mouth, um, of like everywhere. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of things can get painful. And during winter, like skin can crack and
Right.
that can be painful. But we also noticed that my symptoms don't fit perfectly into Sjogren's.
Okay.
Um, because I do get a few other symptoms which are more typical of a slightly more serious autoimmune condition, but it hasn't yet fully manifested. So we just have to wait and see what it is. So I
Okay.
also get a rash on the face. It's called a mala rash. I get ulcers inside my mouth. And
Oh,
in the future, it's possible that um, I could have joint pains. Um, it could lead to other organs also getting affected. But the hope is that we will be able to spot and treat those things or avoid those things that can
mm-hmm.
worsen these symptoms. So,
Right.
in that sense, having migraine helped because it taught me to take care of my body. And now, with
Yes.
this happening, I just began to reframe it in that I started to think, okay, this illness is teaching me how to care for my body better. So it's going to help me find more things that I need to be careful of. A simple thing is winters, right? So whereas last year I was very ignorant of what's happening
Mm-hmm.
during winter, this year I'm more careful to keep myself warm and make sure that um, I'm moisturized well
Right.
and just yeah, things of that sort. I think that I found this to be a really good way of thinking of it, that these illnesses just help me understand the mechanics of my body and help
Right.
me figure out how to take care of it better.
Yeah, I like how you're turning this situation into a positive, making yourself think, okay, I'm going to slow down. So I'm ready for whatever comes. You're not living in fear of what comes. And like you said, you've listened to your body. You've had to make changes before for your migraine. So you know you have the ability to do that again. And it's not something that is overwhelming. As far as like, I know you're married. So I'm assuming your husband is a big support for you. Who do you lean on, like on those days when it feels hard or you're uncomfortable? Do you have somebody you lean on? Do you have like a little thing that you do that makes you feel better?
Yeah. So when I'm unwell, my husband does most of the things that we might have done together. So, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, he would cook the food, which usually is a shared responsibility.
Right.
And I'd just be in bed. He kind of take care of me, which is very sweet. Um,
Yes.
but another thing that really helps, and this is something I found out when I was really young. So the first
Mm-hmm.
time that I had the migraine and I heard the crickets, um, my mom came back home and she was really worried about me. So she just put her hand on my forehead.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how this worked, but within half an hour or so, the symptoms subsided.
Aw.
I
It's
find
the
that,
mother's love.
yeah, so a hand on the forehead, especially from my husband or my mother,
Yeah.
still works. So when I'm not feeling so well, I ask them to just place their hand on my forehead. Um,
Yeah.
and my cat also helps. So I think she also seems to know when I'm not feeling my best. So she just comes and snuggles like up next to me and
Mm-hmm.
purrs, and that also helps. Um, but yeah, very often it's just switch off all the lights, pull the curtains, draw the sheets over myself, and try to sleep. Yeah.
How do you manage like your social life? So from what I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, from what I know of Indian culture, it's a very big community. Food is a very big important part. So we already talked about the food aspect of it. I'm sure some of the days like you have to stay at home to relax and you're like, no, please don't call or come over. How do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yes, in India, food is a really important, vital part of community. Um, and I'll talk about it in a bit. I just want to mention another thing that's really big in India. So in
Mm-hmm.
India, there are these different kinds of celebrations. For
Okay.
example, if someone is getting married, we throw a huge, huge banquet with anywhere between 1,000 and 5,000 people
Oh
just
my
coming to
goodness.
wish the couple. So there have been multiple times when I've had a really bad migraine, which stopped me from going to a friend's wedding. And I think that hits me the hardest, that I wasn't there for them on the day when they were getting married. And this happened with at least three really close friends. So
Mm,
that really upset me that I couldn't be there with them. Um, but like I was saying, food is an important part of the culture. So, for
mm-hmm.
instance, if we were meeting friends, it would have to be over a meal most of the time. So it's very rare that people would meet as friends and go for a movie, or meet as friends and go play some games. Very often to have a meal. Um, so sometimes when friends invite me over to their homes, I would tell them that I have these dietary restrictions. And occasionally they would listen to what I was saying and they would make sure that, the food doesn't have those ingredients. Like yesterday, I went to a friend's house and they were really kind about it. And they made sure that
Good.
the food was perfect for me. But sometimes people come with that attitude of, you're just making this up, or you just need to pray a little bit more, sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And what's happened was, when that happened, I felt really hurt. And I couldn't get past the fact that they were not able to just appreciate this boundary that I had with
Right.
food, or to think that, it's important for me to take care of my body, and that I
Mm-hmm.
can't just eat because they created something, they made something.
Right. Now, here
Um,
in America, I feel like all we talk about is food allergies, right? Like people can't have
yeah,
peanuts or people can't have gluten and things like that. Like it's very
yeah,
common to go places and understand that you can ask for your food to be prepared a certain way or, don't have this at our schools, we have peanut free tables. Is Are food allergies not something that's talked about a lot in India, or is it something that you don't see regularly?
I think in India, there's not as much awareness
Mm-hmm.
of food allergies. I mean, people know, for instance, that seafood could cause allergies. So there are,
Right.
like if you go to a restaurant and you tell them that I can't have shellfish, that's an allergy
Mm-hmm.
they would take seriously. But everything else, it's not as understood, or
Okay.
the general public isn't very aware
So
of
since
it.
your allergy is not one of like the more common ones,
Yeah,
then it's
yeah.
not taken as seriously.
And it's part of Indian food. It's
Right.
staple
That's
stuff.
what we
So,
always do, right? Yeah.
yeah. So they find it really difficult. I think the more complicated thing is that a lot of people depend on these spices for their cooking to bring the
Mm-hmm.
flavors that they want. So asking them to cook without it can feel difficult for them, especially if they're not
Right.
very familiar with cooking.
Mm-hmm. Because
Um,
they don't know what else to put in there
they
to
don't know what else
get
to
that
put in
flavor.
it, or how, yeah, exactly.
Have
Um,
you found good substitutions?
Actually, I found that even if you just leave out those ingredients, it still tastes
It still
really
tastes good.
good.
I like that. You should just tell everybody, like, hey, it's still gonna be great as long as you cook it right.
Yeah. So, for example, chili peppers, and we use a lot of chili powders as well. So red chili
Hmm.
powdered, and just like paprika, but really spicy.
Right.
Um, so instead of that, you can just use black pepper.
Okay.
Use a lot of it, and it creates the spice that we want without it being a trigger. So there are substitutes as well. But in addition to that, some things I find just taste better without the spices.
Hmm.
I also want to say that I found something really interesting when I discovered the food triggers. And I think this is how I found who my people were. So
Hmm.
like I mentioned, I went to friends' houses and they ignored what I was saying. But then I went to my aunt's house, and this is my mom's brother's wife. So my mom's brother's
Hmm.
family. We went there for dinner, and I just explained to my aunt that, I can't have these things because it gives me migraine. And so she made this huge banquet with dishes, and she made the same dishes for me without the ingredients. And I
Aw.
tasted both just to make sure,
Yeah.
and they tasted exactly the same. It was amazing. And what was fascinating was that I didn't have to tell any other relative that I have these food allergies. Every
Hmm.
time I went to another person's house, they made food and they said, we already made it to your requirements because auntie said so. So that was so amazing when, like, they
Yeah.
just, um, yeah, it made me feel really loved that they
Hmm.
would think about it and consider it even before I tell
Yeah.
them anything. Yeah.
That is really sweet. I know you said that you have a book coming out. Is your book related to this?
Yeah. So my book is called From Wounds to Wholeness, a
Hmm. I
doctor's
like that
journey
title.
to healing from trauma. Um, it's a book that talks about a lot of my stories. So it does talk about um, my journey to finding the migraine triggers. It talks about my transition from being a doctor to becoming a writer. And it also talks about deeper issues like um, trauma from childhood. And I've interviewed a lot of people to write this book. So it's not just
Hmm.
my story, but the stories of people who have been through really difficult things like abuse and who've had complicated diagnosis being given to them. And it's just a book that explores how they made sense of it and how I made
Hmm.
sense of my experiences.
You mentioned before earlier that when you were younger, the migraines kind of were born out of trauma. Do you mind sharing what some of the trauma that you experienced?
I can share some of it. Uh,
Okay.
so I think in Indian culture, the school system is quite different.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was really young in school, must have been in the fourth grade at that
Mm-hmm.
point. There was a teacher who was really scary, really, really scary.
Oh.
And she used to hit people, like little children, and
Oh.
she would yell a lot. It was accepted in India at that point. Um, so I remember um, that every time her class was coming, her class was usually after lunch. So there was a period after lunch when there was some other subject, and then there was this one. And if I had not completed my homework right after lunch, I would get a tummy ache.
Yeah,
Um,
because you're nervous to
I
see
was so nervous,
her
and
reaction.
yeah, and I remember going to the school, the first aid area. I forgot what it was called, like a rest space.
Mm-hmm.
And they called my mom, and my mom was like, she doesn't have anything at the moment. But anyway, she came to school and picked me up and took me home.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom kind of, tried to understand what was going on. And I told her about, this teacher. And so they figured out that this teacher was causing so much trauma to so
Yeah.
many kids.
Oh, so the
And
school didn't know she was acting this way.
the school knew about it, but I think they didn't realize what kind of an impact it was having
Okay.
on the kids.
Right.
Um, because I think, like, for a really long time, there was just this thought that, spare the rod, spoil the kid
Spoil
type
the
of,
child. Yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, I think it was just not something that we were talking about in India
Mm-hmm.
at that point. And it was just very normal and casual to spank kids and, be angry with them and that sort of thing. But it was causing a lot of agony for a lot of kids. And this was
Right.
when they figured out. Um, and then I think we tried to speak to the school admin. My mom must have, had a word with them and say that should do something about it. But the sad part was that, a few days later, when the teacher realized that I was the person who raised the complaint,
Oh no.
um, she was just pacing up and down in the class. And by this time, they made sure that there was always another teacher present.
Okay.
So it wasn't just her; it was another teacher
Mm-hmm.
as well. And she said, in Tamil, which is the language of the place where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she said something that meant, "You are the one who brought me disgrace." And
Mm.
I carried that also with me for a really long time. So yeah, this is just one example, but just generally because of the culture, kind of people, and the kind of thinking that exists, there were a lot of other things as well.
Yeah.
It's also very common for girls to get molested when they're really little. So that happened to me as well when I was a kid.
Mm.
Um, yeah, things of that sort.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry that you had to experience that. First of all, as a former fourth grade teacher myself, like that should never happen. You shouldn't be scared to go to school. Adults should never talk down on you, on kids out there. And I know you know that. So I'm really sorry that that happened, as well as being molested. I know that can carry a lot of weight. And I feel like your story, like you've just talked about, the physical things that you're dealing with as far as the chronic migraines and um, the autoimmune condition, but you have a lot of healing and pain inside that you've had to deal with as well. Now, you talked about the culture being different. Was it something like you could go to therapy for? Is it something you kind of had to figure out on your own? Like, figure out like what she said to me, like, I didn't bring her disgrace. Like, I stood up for myself and healing from what you've experienced. How did that happen for you?
Um, yeah, so therapy is another thing that, within the Indian culture is like, um, it's still treated with a lot of skepticism and
Mm-hmm.
stigma. So it's not very easy to for people to go to therapy. But I did speak to a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm.
I had friends who are therapists who helped me through some of these things. But I
Good.
think the biggest thing to help me heal was writing itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when I had um, left clinical medicine and started writing, I had a lot of anger and bitterness towards the fact that I didn't pursue the career that I wanted to pursue.
Mm-hmm.
But I followed a path which was really the dreams of my family and my community. So I was carrying a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, harboring a lot of anger around that. So I wrote to another writer, explaining that, this is what I'm going through. And he's a much older writer, very well established in India. His name is Valsan Tampu. And he gave me this idea that, I could just write about what I'm experiencing and how I'm going through this process of healing. And that, I could write to him and then he would share his thoughts on it. And then it would be like a written counseling session, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And then he said, as you're doing this and it's coming together, just think about making it a book. So actually, that's how this book came into
Okay.
existence. It is a series of conversations that I had with this person, this other writer,
Oh,
Alsit
that's
Tampu.
neat.
So the way we did it was I would write a chapter and send it to him.
Mm-hmm.
And there was chapters where I was processing something. Sometimes it was heavy with research because that's what I was doing at that point. I was researching
Mm-hmm.
something. And then he would send back edits with comments in brackets. And those comments would sometimes go for pages. And those would be things that really uplift and really help me put what I'm going through into perspective.
Okay.
So, a different form of counseling, but it was
Yeah.
very effective. It really helped. And of course, we got this beautiful book out of it.
Yeah. Now, are all is your writings kind of more of that reflective, or what
Yes.
else what other types of writing? Sorry, I'm asking this way. What other types of writings do you do?
um, so I do write fiction. I write
Hmm.
poetry. Um, but I think my favorite at the moment is nonfiction.
Okay.
And yes, it is very reflective. Um, what I found was quite recently, I was thinking I need to be able to live what I write. And then there was a
Mm,
lot of pressure, to make sure that whatever I was living was what I was writing.
right.
So it was like I thought I'm writing this ideal and I need to make sure that I'm living it. But then as I was thinking about it more, I realized that that's not my style at all. My
Okay.
style is to write what I'm living. So I
Yeah.
write from experience and I write lessons that I drew from the stories that I went through.
Yeah.
So it's not that I live what I write, but the other way
Hmm.
around. I write
You
what I
write
live.
what you live.
Yeah.
And like you
So
said, that kind of adds
yeah,
like that therapeutic experience to it as well. It makes you a reflective person, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. And I found that um, a lot of the questions that I ask myself are also questions that other people enjoy, like
Hmm.
answers to. So I started a community of writers,
Oh.
where it's a free community, anyone can join,
Hmm.
where we meet together once in a couple of weeks, and I share writing prompts. And then we just answer those questions, and then towards the end, we might write a poem or a short story or just a little bit of an essay, a little bit of prose, and share it with one another. And we found that this is also really therapeutic.
Now, how did you decide to start your community?
Oh, that's that's a good question as well. So, I had mentioned earlier in the conversation that there was this church that I was part of, which
Yes.
didn't really understand my
Right.
triggers. So when we left that church, there was this huge lacuna. I felt like I didn't have community. The place where I'm living right now is very far from my family. It's it would take us there are no direct flights, so people would have to go through two different airports at least. And if they were to take a train to us or a bus, it would take 24 hours.
Oh,
It's
yeah, that's
quite
a long
far.
time. Yes.
Yeah, so I was feeling very isolated here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, my husband is here, but I felt like I needed friends and I needed people who were on the same wavelength as me.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my mentors at the time said, if you don't have a community there, start a community.
Good
So
advice. Yeah.
um, I started this community online because there were friends in different parts of the country and the world that I wanted to keep in touch with. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt like if it's a virtual community, then it would work well. So that's how the community started. Um,
About how many people do you think you connect with?
right now, there are about 100 people in the community.
Wow, that's awesome,
And
man.
yeah, and I think almost all of them are writers
Okay.
in different phases of their writing
I was
journey.
gonna
A
say,
lot of
could it
them are
just be like an
beginners.
amateur? They don't have to be like
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah, yeah, yeah.
trying to be a professional.
Yeah. And it could also be that, they only want to journal. You can be a writer and only journal. You don't have to
Right.
publish something. So, yeah, we have all kinds of people, just people who like to write. Yeah.
Can you give us an example of like what a prompt was that you recently talked about?
We did a set of workshops using the Psalms as a model.
Mm-hmm.
So, using that, I created a few prompts, and one of them is based on the Psalm 3, where it's a really nice psalm. The psalmist is very, very authentic and honest to God.
Mm-hmm.
And the psalmist says, break the teeth of my foes. And I just thought, that's fantastic. We should be able
Yes.
to at least write like that, without the
You're right.
pretenses. So the prompts were, what is something that's disturbing you today?
Hmm.
What do you know to be true in this situation? And how does that bring you courage? And what would you like God or the higher power to do for you in this context? And people
Mm.
wrote amazing things,
I
the
bet.
equivalent of,
Yeah.
yeah.
That is so deep. I'm like sitting here like, whoa, I'm gonna have to replay this and like sit down and journal myself. That is a really good. So each week it's really, so it's not just like create a story about a fairy tale scene. Like this is real stuff that is making
Mm,
you dig deep into who you are.
yeah, yeah,
That's really neat.
yeah.
And do you always come up with the prompt or do other people lead some weeks? How does that work?
Um, Most of the time I create the prompts, but
Mm-hmm.
what I've done is I've invited different people to talk
Okay.
and to just share their knowledge, their wisdom about different things that we are writing about. So, for instance, there have been people talking to us about storytelling. There have been people
Mm-hmm.
talking to us about poetry. With this group that's working through the Psalms, we also have people coming in talking about, how the Psalms are structured, what what the poetry within it is like, and things of that
Okay.
sort. So people teach. I have asked a few people to share prompts as well to help people reflect and write. And sometimes they do it really well, but I think it's a learning process. So um, I'm hoping that very soon more people will be able to lead these workshops.
Neat. I like that a lot. You're creating space for other people as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think with prompts, it's just the art of, thinking about what question would make me think deeper.
Mhm.
And if we ask the same question to other people, then we'd find that they also think deeper.
Right.
And during these workshops, although I give the prompts, I also write. So I find that it tends to be quite therapeutic for me as well.
And when you and I first met, you let me know there's a lot of things that you could talk about from your life. And when I asked you to pick what you wanted to share and what you felt most comfortable talking about, you really wanted to share about the chronic illnesses and pains that you went through, that you are still dealing with in your life. Now that we've heard what you go through and what you live through pretty much daily, talk to us about what you really hope the listener takes away from what you've shared today and how they can use what you've shared to rise.
Um, Through my life, I've experienced different forms of difficulty, different forms of suffering, whether it's illness or recovery from trauma or having to go into a career that I was not interested in, difficulties with relationships, sometimes financial difficulties, different things of this sort.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to say that, I've found that it helps a lot to think about suffering um, in a new way, meaning try to speak to different people and try to find a narrative for your suffering that empowers you.
Mm-hmm.
Because the stories that we tell around our suffering matter. So if I
Yeah.
say that, I'm suffering because um, I'm a bad person, or I'm suffering because this is what I deserve, or I'm suffering because, the world is against me, that's the story that's going to stick. And it's going to affect us, not just in our mind, but also in our body, in our spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what would help instead is to speak to people, to understand their perspectives on it, and then to create a story about your suffering that works for you. Like I was saying with my illnesses, it's that
Mm-hmm.
these teach me how to take care of my body better. And that almost gives purpose to something that's otherwise, just a pain in the neck, right?
Right.
So that would be the last thing that I would say, you know, um, try to see if there's a story that's more powerful for you in whatever you're going through.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing yourself with the people that you're helping and as you're helping yourself too. And we'll definitely link the information to join your community or to look at your website. And also, I know your book's not coming out for a few months, but we'll check back in and we'll be excited to hear. I will definitely get a copy. I'm excited to
Yes.
hear and read about your exchanges with the other authors. So I think it's going to be wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a beautiful conversation.
Thank you. Anne's story has so many layers to it. We didn't just hear a woman talk about being sick or not feeling well. We heard how illness and pain have reshaped her entire life. Things that many of us take for granted, the food we eat, the culture we grew up in, the friendships we assumed would hold, all of that has been tested by something completely outside of her control. And yet, Anne finds a way to carry the weight of it all through writing. It's her passion, her outlet, and her bridge to connection. In the show notes, you'll find a link to her Instagram. I really encourage you to follow her. She often shares her poems, and they are truly beautiful. As Anne wrapped up the conversation, she said, "Change the narrative." She also said, "Create a story around your suffering that works for you." She's not telling us to pretend everything is fine or to deny that we're going through something. She's inviting us to rise above it, to look at our pain and ask how it might move us forward instead of holding us back. And that's not easy. It can be terrifying to confront the truth of a situation or to acknowledge the limits something has placed on us. But that's where real growth begins. When we stop running from the hard parts and start facing them with honesty and compassion, we give ourselves a chance to heal, to shift, and to become someone stronger on the other side. Anne took her hurt and turned it into art. She uses her gift for writing to help others feel seen and teaches other writers how to do the same. And while, yes, Anne's story and many of the stories on this podcast begin in a place of pain or struggle, your story doesn't have to start there. If you're someone who hasn't walked through the fire, that's wonderful. You still have something to offer. You still have a voice, a gift, and a perspective that can help someone else. In honor of Anne, I will do my best to give you a thoughtful writing prompt. So when you get a chance, pick one and reflect on it. Here we go. Here's the first one. Write about a moment in your life where the story you were telling yourself kept you stuck. Then explore what happens when you shift that narrative. What new meaning, possibility, or direction becomes available when you choose to see it differently. Or my second one is reflect on a gift, talent, or passion that has helped you grow. How can you lean into that strength even more and allow it to expand in your life? If you would like to share your reflection with me or others, look for Where We Rise Pod on YouTube. I'll post these questions in the community section and you can reply there. I can't wait to see what you write. All right, y'all. That's our time for today, but you know what I'm going to say. As you move through the rest of your day, I hope you take a moment to listen a little louder to yourself, to the people you love, and to the things that connect us in ways we sometimes forget to notice. I'll meet you back here next time. See ya, bye.